Welcome to the Charleston CFO Council. This organization was co-founded in 2015 by Robert Bendetti and Mark Carmichael in order to provide a networking and educational forum for senior financial executives to share best practices, to discuss current financial issues, and to learn about current topics related to the performance of their job.
One of the great things about coming to a meeting like this, there's no traffic going up the stairs to my office. So I guess there are advantages to having WebEx meetings. So obviously the national holiday today is Tax Day, which has been postponed to July, but there are other national days. It's Wild Guest Day. It's also Titanic Remembrance Day. Yes, the Titanic sunk many years ago. And again, it's my pleasure and NFP's pleasure to sponsor this meeting, and we appreciate being members of the Charleston CFO Council. So I'll turn it back to you, Robert, and thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dan. In a couple minutes, I'm going to yield my mouse over to you. Hopefully, it'll be seamless, and people won't even be able to notice that I've given you the mouse. We'll see how that actually goes. But so this is Dan's bio that he sent me. Of course, I'm not going to read it. I have found my own information. Dan, can you hear me, and can you say hello?
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you virtually, if not in person.
So Dan Berry is the Senior Vice President at NFP. Yeah, before that, oh, and Dan, sometimes I just make stuff up. So if this isn't true, please let me know, okay?
That's not true, but that's fine. No, it's fine.
Okay. Whew. All right. These points I hope are good. So this I found myself. Some of this stuff I had to include the work of my associates, and my associates are my teenagers who check the social medias, and my wife, who's like an investigative reporter. So before that, various elected roles, including, were you mayor of a town?
Mayor pro tem of a small town, that's right.
All right, very cool, very cool. And you got your undergrad in political science, appropriately enough, from the great College of Charleston. Now, you're not from Charleston. You live up in the North Carolina area. So how did you decide to come down to South Carolina?
That's a story that's not appropriate to be recorded on a PowerPoint presentation, but one of my best friends from high school was from Beaufort. I went down for a summer, and while I was there, we drove to Charleston, and I said, this is where I'm going to school.
I'm going to assume it has something to do with the girl. You're the former Union County GOP chairman. And now this is, I don't know if this is true or not, but did...
Yes.
Is this true?
That is absolute. Y'all were busy. That is absolutely correct. And that story went on Big Fox around the world. And y'all remember the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off? The difference is my car didn't come back.
Yeah, that's a funny article. I read it. That ballet high speed, and your car was toast after an accident.
He spent a week in the hospital, and according to the engineers, he was going about 75 miles an hour when he hit the tree in front of the Charlotte airport.
Well, he was in a hurry.
Me.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Me to pay his emergency room bill because, quote, my car was out of alignment.
Oh my gosh. Did he win?
No.
Okay. All right, good. And then lastly, were you in 1982 one of Kroger's Quick Fixers panel members in your small town where you grew up in North Carolina?
No.
Oh, darn it. I wanted this to be you.
That is me, but I don't know what you're referencing in the quick fixers.
Well, you were a food tasting panel member, and you would eat different.
Correct.
They would quote you. The panel was called, you don't even remember these things, the Quick Fixers panel. And here's some sample quotes. This is about
It's going to be hilarious.
This is about asparagus. Berry like green giant asparagus the best. And I quote, "It had great taste and the best texture to go along with it." And then when talking about cream cheese, you gushed. Barry grabbed a spoon excitedly, and I quote, "This is my specialty. I eat it by the bar. Every year I ask my mother to make me a huge cheesecake for my birthday."
That's true. You dug deep to find this.
All right, I'm gonna stop.
I'd forgotten about that.
Well, I have more, but at some point we have to actually get to your presentation or
Where
people.
did you find that? That's what I want to know.
I don't reveal my sources.
Oh my gosh. Well, I was warned. I'm very, very impressed. So, you ready for me to go, I guess?
Yeah, I'm gonna take over the mouse for just a second just to get rid of something. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, you should be good to go. Sorry.
No problem. No problem. So when we started talking about this, it was pre-COVID. And I was looking forward to coming down and being with y'all on tax day, and then calling some fraternity brothers and college roommates and heading out to go fishing this afternoon after our presentation. With neither of those are happening, and I'm at my home office, and if you notice over my right shoulder, in spite of the fact that I went to the College of Charleston, I'm in a room that's painted in Clemson colors because my youngest son was a Clemson fanatic. And being the good father that I am, I allowed my children to paint their rooms the colors that they wanted. We won't discuss my daughter's room. So as we start to talk about in the 25, 30 minutes we've got about executive benefits, I think it's important to recognize that material we prepared is pre-COVID, but I want to feed to the presentation today kind of what I see coming at us around executive compensation in its entirety, especially when we talk about unemployment rates and getting folks back to work and getting the economy moving again in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I think it's going to be there's a huge opportunity for us that run businesses, but there are going to be some challenges and some headwinds in the process. As we talk about executive benefits, I think it's important to understand why they even exist. And that's because you have a group of highly compensated employees that are unique, that are different than your rank and file employees, both in their performance indicators, the value that they're adding ultimately to your franchises, and then how do we treat them? And so we've got to design programs that ensure that your businesses will thrive and position you to win the global war of talent. So executive compensation is an intersection between some programs that you may already have. Your health and care program, your benefits, your retirement plans, your 401k, pension, money purchase pension, 403b, 457b and F plan, all of that. And then finally, corporate property and casualty. And so where those things all come together, we find this intersection for executive benefits. Robert, any questions?
Yes, so let me take them out for just a second. And first question here is, when you talk about P&C with executive benefits, how is casualty associated with high compensated employees?
That's a great question. So many of our in many of our programs, our casualty programs that wrap around our executives, key executives, exclude some risk associated with those executives. So when you have a key person, you actually want them to be involved in your community. And so oftentimes we find that you're lending a CFO or a head of sales or marketing or a distribution partner to a local agency, and they don't have D&O insurance for their board position, directors and officers insurance for their position on that board. You as an employer have the ability to provide umbrella coverage that includes those actions by serving on a board. It's $600 a person for $5 million of coverage. It is a nominal expense, but it provides a significant security for those actions for those executives.
Great. That was the only question. Thank you.
So let's take a look at the questions where we started, which was your retirement plan and your health and employee benefit plans, and what happens. So the more that you make, the less of your final pay is going to come from your qualified retirement plans and Social Security. Likewise, most companies that provide a long-term disability plan or a group life plan, there are embedded limitations in those programs as to covered percentage of compensations and maximum. So if you have a typical group LTD plan, 60% to $10,000, incomes in excess of $200,000 are not covered. And frankly, what's interesting is many of those plans exclude incentive compensation. Same thing on the group life insurance plan. If you offer a multiple of compensation or a multiple of salary, you need to go in there and see how much of that benefit is actually guarantee issue without evidence of insurability versus the maximum amount. Because those can be two very different numbers, and we need to make sure that we understand. Digging a little bit deeper into the qualified retirement plans, we have to pay attention to what are those ratios that exist from final pay. And the 401k plan specifically, and 457 plans a little bit differently, limit the impact or the ability for highly compensated employees to have significant retirement income. And that's done in a variety of ways. One is the regulatory environment. There is legislation that limits how much money can be contributed to by a participant into their plan. Second is by design. The employer provide or plan sponsor provide an enhanced or a match or a profit sharing contribution. And finally, what's your participation like? Because if you got weak participation, it's going to limit what executives can defer. So the more you make, and we'll see a much clearer graphic on this in just a minute, the less and less valuable your qualified retirement plan is going to be in helping you reach your retirement income goal. Robert, I see that. Is there a question?
Yes. Questions around now with us in the middle of COVID, any clients restructuring qualified plans, making as an example to match or profit sharing?
Yeah, we are seeing not across the board modifications of plans, but in the recent COVID bills that came out of Congress, there is the flexibility for plan sponsors to modify their matches or profit sharing, well, obviously the profit sharing contributions, but modify their matches midterm. And we have seen some clients pull back on their matches or their corporate contributions to the plans just as they need to preserve cash in the event that the COVID crisis and stay-at-home orders impacted their business longer than they had planned. So much more of a defensive posture.
And then one more. Again, these are coming out of the chat box, guys. If anybody has any questions or comments, you can post them in the chat to me privately. This one's from me, Dan, is So one thing I've always thought about with the retirement income or target having your executives, very senior leadership ready for retirement, is that some of them near the end, they're already retired, you're just paying them. And so it's in the business's best interest as a CFO to have your senior leadership prepared for retirement. It can be very expensive, even if it's just for a couple of years or 3 years. It's impossible to get rid of them. The last 3 years, they've given so much to the company, and they're probably still doing okay. But that's just, I'm kind of a comment, but your thoughts on the expense of having senior executives who aren't ready for retirement. That's also expensive, just like an executive retirement. These sort of
in about 3 slides, I'm going to address that specifically.
Thank you.
Yeah. So when we talk about this retirement savings thing, this is the best graph that demonstrates it, because you can see that there is this gap. And statistics tell us, and surveys, that folks want to end up close to 80% of their retirement income. Well, I've been doing this a lot longer than 20 years, and I'm yet to meet the person that just unilaterally says, when I punched the ticket for the last time, I want to have a 20% reduction in my cash flow when I retire. It's unrealistic. It may happen, but that's not their desire. And so what we have to do is work together, utilizing corporate resources and behavior to enhance, incentivize additional savings to prepare our executives for falling off and retiring. So, as we talk about the challenge that we have, and I went one slide too far and I'm trying to back it up and it won't let me. Robert, can you do that for me real quick? When we talk, we have to look at what the impact of having executives not prepared to retire does. Robert's point a minute ago, when you don't have executives meeting those income needs, it becomes very expensive. And it's not just the cost of having inefficient executives, but you also have the most expensive employee benefit cost at the same time. And so you can see that over a 3-year deferred retirement, you're increasing your cost almost 8.5% of total compensation just for keeping these folks around. Incentive, and we're doing some behavior dynamics on this now to look at if we took some of that cost from age 65 to 70 on their health and welfare plan and applied that to the deferred compensation arrangement, could we close that gap and actually have an efficient frontier calculation that showed that by adding a little bit of money to supplemental retirement, we're saving a lot on the backside, and there's an equilibrium in there where everybody wins. And we're working through some of that math today. The second piece on this that's coming is up until COVID, we were at full employment. And if you look at employment of individuals with 4-year degrees, we were at negative full employment because there were more jobs available than we had people. And so companies were really struggling to find adequate professionals. So when you look at somebody, it's about a 400% total cost of salary. And that's lost proficiency, recruiting, training, development, and intellectual capital. And I would argue that the intellectual capital drain is most significant. Now, there's obviously going to be some issues with COVID. And I think it's going to happen more in the rank and file base at this point than in our executive class. But I'm interested to see how the impact of that is going to be with our highly comps. Robert, any questions?
Just around that, post-COVID, do you have any sense of how this stacks up current data, highly compensated employee employment levels?
We are beginning to see in specific industries, like belt store services is shut down right now, and furloughing and reducing compensation. We are not seeing across the board executive unemployment. I think as we go back into the economy and re-engage and re-motivate, there are going to be some challenges because with people working from home, or are they really motivated to get back into the swing? There's a lot of soul searching going on at, John Doe 2.0. What does that look like? And then I think the employer side is, are we furloughing folks or using this as an opportunity to right side? But I haven't seen yet, if we're not aware of any data yet, that puts us in a spot to say we're seeing of the 30% unemployment target that we're seeing, of that, 5% of it is in the highly compensated or executive class. We don't have that data yet. Other questions?
No, thank you.
Sure. So we've talked about the retirement side. Now let's talk about group welfare plan. So the LTD, group long-term disability, and group life plan. So you got to remember with group life plans that it's that some multiple of salary, and in many cases it might just be a flat $50,000. But the more you make on multiple of income plans, there is maximum. So if you're allowing your employees to get 2 times compensation to $300,000, and you have executives that make incomes that are more significant that would put them above the limit, then you as an employer are artificially disenfranchising a group of your employees from your employee benefit strategy. Think of it like we had, for those of you that are old like me, 20 years ago, when we talked about 401k plans and pension plans and employee benefit plans, it was alphabet soup. We want to give options and allow people to make choices. Now we've seen that entire conversation move to what can we do as a plan sponsor to have a specific outcome, wellness, health insurance, equivalent life insurance benefits, and a retirement experience. We want everybody to get to the end healthy, financially full and healthy. So everything moves to an outcome basis. Well, if that's true, then our life insurance and disability insurance programs have typically been left behind because it's not an outcome, because the highly compensated folks have a different result than our rank and file. And here is the perfect example. The more I make, the less is coming from on our disability program. So in this particular case, we have a 60% income benefit. Well, in a census that we're looking at right now, a clear majority of their group, very limited coverage. And if you look at the high flyer out there, only 9% income is covered in the event that he becomes disabled. Far more likely to become disabled than to die. 8 is more likely between the ages of 30 and 60. So when you look at these solution sets around executives, it's this key employee. What are we doing to recruit, retain, reward, and ultimately retire our very best talent? And so we have a collection in this industry of solution sets to help you design programs around those groups of executives. Complete your retirement, whether you want to do that on a fashion that is carried on your balance sheet or in an after-tax basis like a Roth IRA, and we'll talk about that, In the nonprofit world, 457 plans. Not great designs, frankly, but they're out there and they're something that you should be aware of. And pure retention plans. What are you doing to make sure you keep people in a very hyper-competitive employment environment? On the last side, as we talked about life and disability insurance, I call them restoration plans. You've got a collection of welfare benefits that are out there, and you are limiting their utilization from your executive. So what are you going to restore the lost benefits from them? So restoration plans. I'm going to slides. Robert, any questions?
Yeah, 3 questions. First is around on this slide, the two buckets. If I make a line of demarcation here between the package of things that falls in the retirement and that falls in retention, would the supplemental short-term disability fall in retention? Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so really you got 3 sections or 3 columns here: retirement, retention, and restoration. I would argue that the 2 primaries, and then, if you're prioritizing, there's 1 and 1, which is retirement and restoration. Because if you become disabled or die prematurely, you have not had the ability to fulfill your family's needs for retirement income planning. So those 2 things kind of connect. And the second piece is reward and retention. And I'll combine those together because those are kind of secondary benefits that we look at, unless you've got a real issue with turnover and you want to focus that. But in all of our planning, we kind of start with the retirement and restoration and work down to retention.
3 questions, good ones. First is, from a previous slide, do you feel that under this current environment, stock prices down, our 401ks or 301 have turned into 301ks? Do you see the gap growing, and therefore maybe the demand for this these options for executives, as those balance in our retirement readiness declines? Do you think the demand for these type of things might grow?
Yeah, it was interesting. I had a call with the client yesterday, and there was a question about that. So the market was down from a high point about 35%. I'm using averages here. It's come back a fair amount. We're still off about 18%. I didn't see what it did yesterday. I would argue that we're anticipating a market correction anyway in that 15 to 20% range. We were way overdue. So that the other 10 or 15 points came from the fear, the panic in the market, and we've recovered a little bit. That being said, 30% down and 30% up is not 100%.
Yep.
So we had a conversation yesterday about what do we do to enable folks to save more, and what are we going to do to incentivize. So there are 2 pieces to that. One is absolutely we see 2021 being a period of time where if they have existing plans, increasing deferrals. We see that coming. If they don't have plans today, we see post-COVID, meaning when we're back face to face, a lot of energy around creating some plans with these dynamics in Q3 and Q4 of 2020. Second piece to this is companies are about restructuring their compensation plans. And what I mean by that is there's not a lot of cash flow for some businesses today. Are there going to be incentive payments, bonuses, et cetera, paid in 2021 for performance in 2020? Probably not. And if not, is there a way the company can provide some supplemental incentives in their retirement plans that are not vested, or with some of these benefit restoration arrangements that makes up for some of the lost income that these individuals may have had as a result of, being furloughed, or not furloughed, but staying at home and businesses being closed for a couple of months.
One more question is, what role should this play recruitment, retain, reward, retire around succession planning? How does this complement be part of succession planning for senior executives?
So I think there's a lot there's a lot in there in a limited bit of time that we have today. But when you're talking about leadership succession and not ownership succession, absolutely there needs to be a component. And there's some material that I didn't bring for this meeting, but I can certainly send to you and you can forward it out. It really looks at a census of an employer. And, with the bottom 50% of your group is just standard 401k, health and welfare, retirement. And then another chunk of your employee base receives a certain set of benefits. And then as you move up the chain of command, if you will, you're offering different benefits until you get to the C-suite, where you are identifying the next set of leaders. So maybe they're the VPs versus the SVPs. And we need to make sure if we're going to invest in them to prepare them to run our businesses, then we need to also make sure that they're here to run our businesses. And there is a retention component, either through a defined benefit arrangement or a defined contribution arrangement, the ability to make it very expensive to an employee or an executive for leaving and going to work somewhere else. Inside business, you want to watch an owner panic, ask him who his number one guy is, and ask him what happens if he leaves, and then ask him what happens if not only he left, but he goes to work for your biggest competitor. Non-competes aren't on without compensation attached to them. So just be careful if you go in that direction, but there are ways that we can create some incentives in these arrangements for this retention issue you bring up.
Dan, I'm going to hold the other questions I have just because we're at the 10-minute mark and I want to allow you to pace yourself properly. So I'll hold those and we have time.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up the speed here just a little bit because we are running. Trying to get slides good. There it goes. So just look, as I mentioned before, just looking at a specific payroll, same account that we looked at before, different levels of executives receiving different benefits, and they compound. They lay on top of each other. So as you mature in a business, you add additional components to compensation outside of salary and bonus. So when we talk about retirement, you have the ability, and I don't know if you can see my cursor when I move it, but I'm very quickly going to just talk about different components. So in a supplemental non-qualified plan, you have the ability for the employee to defer their own money. Because it's a non-qualified plan, different deferral election for bonus, unlike the 401k where it's all one piece of compensation. But then the company has the ability to match it or to make a discretionary contribution. And in many cases, you can have it capture any refunds that would be coming out of a qualified retirement plan. It's an option that's out there. And so the employee defers separate types of compensation, the employer can match, and it can be investing on the employer components, even if those components and have a different vesting schedule than what you would have in your 401k plan. So you can have a much longer vesting period, i.e. retention, on employer contributions in these plans than you would see in your 401k arrangement. To advance. If it jumps ahead, I'll grab it. I want to deal specifically with the employer discretionary contribution. So we're talking about defined contribution plans versus defined benefit plans. Here, the company has the ability just to define that discretionary contribution any way it wants. It is one of the last discriminatory benefits when we talk about executive benefits. So you can say Betty gets $50,000 and Johnny gets 20 and Billy gets 5 and Sue gets 100. That has to be no rhyme or reason. It is 100% discretionary and discriminatory. You have the ability in your compensation programs to design these any way you want. Most people create some structure around it, but there is extraordinary flexibility. And in all of these plans, when we talk about defined contribution, the retirement slide before and this one, you're going to have the ability as a participant to asset allocate this and manage it through the market. So you, just like your 401k. So the company is going to accrue a liability, what it owes to its employees or its executives based on those deposits and market results. A prudent financial officer then needs to figure out, I've got a payment that I'm going to make when these folks reach age 65. How am I going to accumulate those assets? Because I don't want to sell a bricks and mortar to pay them. What am I going to do? So companies set aside or create a sinking fund so that those assets are available. And there's some pluses and minuses, advantages and disadvantages between using tax managed investments or taxable investments. And a prudent advisor will work with you to identify kind of your design, your cash flow modeling, and then fit into that based on your specific tax and cash flow situation, what the best option is. I will tell you, in a taxable environment, somewhere in the 65 to 70% range of executive benefit deferred compensation plans are funded using very specialized insurance products. Really big companies with different cash flow out there may elect to use mutual funds, but generally speaking, the broader segment of this is using insurance. I'll add on to this, the reason behind that is the tax effect on mutual funds versus the cost of insurance embedded in an insurance contract. And when you weigh that out, as I mentioned, in taxable environments, the net frictional cost of the insurance tends to be, over the long term, a much more efficient tool than using mutual funds. And of course, your circumstances may be different than that. We have some very sophisticated software that allows us to model that out and provide you back. And most advisors should have access to that to give you some clear direction on it. I'm going to jump forward and just say that there are options that create retirement income off your balance sheet, and those fall under Code Section 162, executive bonus arrangements. They're going to look and feel like Roth IRAs. The executive pays tax today. They get tax-free income on the basis and on the earnings based on some certain design characteristics and under current law. I don't want to dig into that much today, but you can have a plan that's on your balance sheet where you control the assets, or you have a plan that you currently deduct and you get it off your income statement and balance sheets, and the executive then has the ability to maintain it. When you talk about retention plans, though, after-tax solutions are not very good because you've already discharged that asset and they're controlling. I am going to just jump ahead. We've talked a lot about group LTD. Better example is right here, $250,000 income. Group LTD is really limiting the amount of coverage that we have. So we add on a supplemental plan and increase the coverage back to 60% or 65% after tax, depending on your solution that you're looking at. And you can see very quickly that we want to make folks whole. What's unique here is the individual disability insurance is going to be definitionally stronger. From an earnings perspective, it's going to protect more earnings, and the premium, the cost, is fixed for life. Where your group LTD is less expensive, it's more volatile based on experience. Your individual insurance, your individual policies bounce around. Same situation we talked about earlier. You can see that a census for this employer clearly delineates three classes of employees, those that are in the more rank and file area, and then you can see the CEO at the top. And so there is a group of folks that are disenfranchised from the LTD programs, and there's ways to resolve that. You talk about the benefits, and we'll close it here. You've got really two things that are going to weigh down on this. What is your organization like? And what is your budget and sensitivity to your income statements and balance sheets? And then we have the ability to mirror those two along with your corporate objectives and deliver.
Dan has popped off for a second, and I'm sure he's going to be coming back. So I'll give him just a second. I'm going to go through. Hey, Dan, you're back.
I don't know what happened, but I don't know where you lost me, but I was closing up.
Yeah, it was closing. I was getting excited. I thought I had more speaking time. But, yeah, we just missed the last word.
Well, all I was saying is the key to successful planning is making sure you have clearly defined objectives and outcomes, and then monitor your programming and your advancement against what that outcome, that stated objective is. It's not just create a plan and put it in a box. These programs need to be actively managed. What are we trying to accomplish? How are we marching towards that accomplishment, and looking at it on an individual basis? As you mentioned earlier, on the retention tool or on the legacy retirement, I'll call it malingering. That's not your word, mine. But what are we doing to make sure folks are ready? And if we're not monitoring that, we don't know. And that's what we want to help you do in my practice every day.
Awesome, Dan. I got a couple of quick fire questions for you, okay? What organization would use the after-tax programs that you were talking about?
After-tax programs could be used in any environment. They tend to be used in smaller organizations that do not want assets held on their balance sheets. So there's sensitivity to bankruptcy or claims of creditors. The second option is nonprofits. So 457 plans, F and B arrangements, have some pretty draconian rules around vesting and distribution. And we are finding more and more of those companies or entities, including hospitals, looking at more sophisticated uses of life insurance and getting away from the 457, pure 457F arrangements.
Quick fire number two, around phantom stocks or synthetic equity. How could phantom stocks be a part of this discussion? What are the pros and cons, any pitfalls, any positive, negatives somebody should look out for?
Sure. Synthetic equity refers specifically to the P-test inside of an ESOP. I got way too jargonistic for you. When you start talking about synthetic equity, you need to be very, very, very careful because it has some very adverse consequences in qualified plans, specifically to ESOP. Phantom stock, which is a component of synthetic equity, a raving fan of. There are other ways to connect retirement asset value, equity value, to corporate performance versus giving a phantom share of stock. And here's one of the reasons that I don't like it. In a company's infancy or in their adolescence, management and ownership are clearly aligned to grow and prosper. As you move into that legacy phase, the ownership's interest diverge. Owners start worrying about estate tax, business transition, second homes, if they're businesses, airplanes and cars, and they start pulling out capital to pay for some of that stuff. It reduces share value, and out of no issues will suppress share value and the phantom retirement account. There's some language you can put in there to address that, but it doesn't look and feel good if you're not the owner.
Dan, that was awesome. That was a fantastic presentation. I've got a bunch more questions I'm holding for the sake of time, but I'm going to send out your contact information and Bob Reinhold's contact information with the deck so people can reach out to you directly. Okay? And Dan, would you send me that succession planning document you spoke to during your presentation? And if you have something, I'll include it with your deck that I send out to all members.
I will get you something. It'll be later today.
Yeah, absolutely. So in closing, I just want to say thank you very much. I found that presentation to be fantastic. That was a lot of information in a short period of time, but it's good and it's important. Retirement preparedness is a key leading indicator of future corporate labor costs. Doing nothing is super expensive. And so just as a 401k match and some education is a cheap investment for your employees, rank and file, I think executive plans could be a net savings and maybe even retain key talent. I had an old boss one time talk about how expensive acquisitions are, but how acqui-hires stealing key employees from competitors, just like Dan was talking about that number one sales gal, number one sales guy at a firm, that was so much cheaper than acquiring a whole company with a bunch of problems. So there are people out there, your competitors, that are looking around, and Julie and Jessica and John, who are your key employees, ooh, they're going to coffee. They're saying hi when they see them at conferences, telling them their suit looks so nice and their bow tie is sharp. They're courting your key employees. And so this might be a strategic weapon, both offense and defense. So it's something to think about. It certainly is complex, and just like many of the things, you don't have to be an expert in this executive compensation and all these options. But I think an idea might be pitch this to the CEO kind of at 100,000 feet. And if he or she shows any interest, then call in a partner like Bob with NFP for a quiet conversation to get equipped and get some info, and then pitch more details to the head gal or head guy in charge at your firm. So last 3 points, as always, spread the word on LinkedIn. Almost every presentation we've ever had, every speaker, every sponsor has heard about us on LinkedIn. So like, comment, and share on LinkedIn my post. This is not difficult, and I know who you are who do it. And at our next physical meeting, when we all escape from our bunkers and we have breakfast together and break bread, I'm going to give 3 people a coffee cup. If you are not already, join us on our LinkedIn group. The Charleston CFO Council has a LinkedIn group. And then my last comment is just a wholehearted thank you to Bob Reinhold and Dan Barry with NFP. You guys have been awesome to partner with during this whole process. This is complicated to pivot from a physical meeting to a WebEx, and I really appreciate all the time that you put in this. And I have you muted. I can hear Bob saying, thank you, Robert. You're amazing. You're the most wonderful and handsome person I know. I'm reading your mouth, so I'm just going to say it for you. And thank you, Bob. I appreciate all those kind words. They're all true. Everyone have a really awesome and wonderful day. I thank you very much, and goodbye.